Everywhere we turn, seems like another giant pharmaceutical company is abandoning the small molecule GLP-1 oral pills, except for Eli Lilly, who announced that they've got billions ready to hit the market. We get into why this concerns me. We talk about patient access, patient safety, all the things that we cover here to empower you to have more competent and confident conversations with your doctor. You are on the pen.
Welcome to the On the Pen podcast with your host, Dave Knapp.
Over in the UK, they are cracking down on counterfeit versions of GLP-1s. Check this story out. The UK Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency is not just a mouthful. It's actually an organization put together by the government over there to basically ensure that drugs are safe and accessible to patients. And they dismantled this week what they're calling the largest illegal weight loss drug operation ever recorded. So this was inside a warehouse over in Northampton. Investigators found over 2,000 counterfeit Tirzepatide and Retatrutide pens, tens of thousands of additional empty pens, and raw chemical ingredients ready to fill them. And authorities here said that this was a production facility, not a resale facility, and the first of its kind to actually be discovered in the United Kingdom. Now, over in the UK, when you talk about accessibility, a lot of times people here in the United States will compare the prices that we pay list to the prices that they pay over in the UK and wonder why that's the case. Well, the trade-off for cheaper drugs over there is oftentimes they're less accessible for people unless they're in a specific group or population that are approved for treatment. So for many over in the UK, it's actually very difficult to get a hold of these medications. And for those folks, they don't have the luxury of compounding. So what we've seen is this explosion of gray market, unregulated versions of these medications popping up. And this is the first tip off that the UK is taking this very seriously and closing down these kind of operations. So for you and me, when we talk about this, and for those of you who are watching across the pond, this isn't really a story about crime, and it never is when we're talking about gray market. It's usually a story about access, patient accessibility or lack thereof, wherever the patients are. And there's always going to be a demand for cheaper alternatives. And this is exactly what this is. So counterfeiters thrive when the real versions of these medications are unreachable for patients. And when the prices soar, supply chains break. In the United States over here, when compounding is shut down or limited in accessibility, of course, desperation will lead bad actors to fill those gaps. And that's what's happened here. So it's a fascinating story. We'll continue to watch this out of the UK. Listen, this is why here at On the Pen, it's very important to us that patients get access to both branded versions and compound versions when medically and clinically necessary. That's why we partner with our partners over at Shed. ShedRx exists to connect you with licensed clinicians and FDA approved and compounded medications safely, transparently. That's the goal. You can visit tryshed.com. It'll be tryshed.com/OTP in a couple of days, but you can use code OTP25 to save a bundle off of your first interaction with them over at Shed. Just go over there and check them out. They've got a whole bunch of different things that they offer here from primarily Strive Compound Pharmacy. So when we're looking for somebody to partner with that offered safe and reliable compounds, we wanted to find somebody who partnered with specifically Strive, and Shed work together on most of their compounds over there. So visit tryshed.com, use /OTP or use code OTP25 to save a bundle. This story here is sort of rocking the obesity world, really the whole medical world. Cigna, which is a massive health insurance company, made headlines this week when they announced that they're going to be eliminating all drug rebates by 2027 to help patients. Which, just immediately to me felt like a huge trap, right? Like what's really going on here? Of course, immediately we saw Cigna stock jump, by 2% when they announced that one of the primary ways that they make money is going to go away? I don't think so. Something else is going on here. So just kind of looking to decode what they're doing over there at Cigna. And if you look at it, Cigna owns Express Scripts, one of the biggest PBMs in the entire country. And these rebates that they say they're going to eliminate, obviously, you basically have the list price of a medicine, right? That's what we always compare to the rest of the world. We say in the United States, Zepbound is $1,100, where you can get, the starter doses of Mounjaro for maybe $150 overseas. Like, what's the discrepancy? Well, the discrepancy is that when these drug companies arbitrate to get access to the patients that these PBMs represent, the PBMs basically say, well, we want X amount of dollars in form of a rebate every time a patient fills that script. So they're basically middlemen that are fleecing the entire country in terms of the cost of prescription drugs, taking oftentimes in a hearing on Capitol Hill, we heard from Novo Nordisk, oftentimes up to 80% of the cost of a medication can be gobbled up of these PBMs. So when they say we're going to get rid of rebates, just think about it this way. They're going to find another way to get that money and call it something else. So whether they call it service fees or data partnerships or placement bonuses, they're going to be called something else, and it's going to not hurt them at all. In fact, basically what Wall Street thought yesterday was that it would probably help them in the long run. So for patients, this is not reform. This is not helpful. It is lip service and rebranding. The same dollars still going to change hands, just under new names that honestly might be even harder to untangle in the future. So that's exactly why over here at On the Pen, we work with Claimable, because Claimable automates your prior authorizations and appeals. Visit claimable.com/OTP. You can save 10% by using code OTP10. Listen, these insurance companies are relying on the fact that when they deny access to your Zepbound, 90% of patients are not going to fight it. And Claimable gives you the platform to fight it. And they've got about a 50% track record of success in terms of helping people get back on their medication. So at every turn, the insurance companies are going to fight to cover the things that they are required to cover, and they're going to expect you not to fight. I've actually spent my entire morning not preparing for this podcast, but trying to get my wife's biologic drug that she takes for rheumatoid arthritis covered. And I have spent the entire morning on it. The entire morning. They want to fatigue you. They want to make you tired. They want to wear you out. So Claimable gives you a tool that makes the process, honestly, the biggest value is it just makes the process less exhaustive, gives you a chance to get your medicine back. Love our friends over at Claimable. Mazdutide. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the new drugs that are coming on the market. This one in China. So there was big headlines this week that Mazdutide outperformed semaglutide in China, and I read through this and I was like, this is not the full story here. This is not everything that's going on. So in China, Innovent Biologics released late stage results from what they're calling the DREAMS 3 trial. So this shows that the dual agonist Mazdutide, which is a GLP-1 plus glucagon receptor agonist, led to greater weight loss than semaglutide 1 milligram in adults with type 2 diabetes. Now, at 32 weeks, patients on Mazdutide lost an average of 10.3% of their body weight compared to 6% on semaglutide 1 milligram. And no new safety concerns were reported, although if you look at the numbers, the GI side effects were a little bit higher with the Mazdutide. So context really matters here. The trial used a 1 milligram dose of semaglutide. In the United States for type 2 diabetes, semaglutide, Ozempic, goes up to 2 milligrams once weekly. And that's not the case in China. So over in China, where this particular clinical trial was run, all the participants were Chinese. So this is, different metabolic issues perhaps than your standard trial of United States citizens. But the Ozempic only goes up to 1 milligram there. So they chose to run it up against one milligram of Ozempic. So of course you're going to get, some inferior results from semaglutide in that trial. So I don't think it really tells us much. Mazdutide is approved for obesity and diabetes in China. But I don't expect that we'll actually see this. It's co-licensed with Eli Lilly over there, but I don't think Eli Lilly has any plans to bring Mazdutide to the United States. When you think about Retatrutide, which is just about, I don't know, let's say 18 to 24 months away from hitting the American market, which adds not only GLP-1 and glucagon, but GIP to that equation too. And I think the results for Retatrutide will be much, much like worlds far superior than Mazdutide is. So it's like, why would they launch that one here? It doesn't make a lot of sense. This one is kind of a fascinating story. So we've been following a company called Terns Pharmaceutical, and Terns Pharmaceutical has had some really interesting candidates in the pipeline. We did an article back last year at On the Pen kind of covering all the things that they were doing at Turn, and I was actually kind of excited about it. Now, what I want to zoom in on today are kind of two headlines that are happening simultaneously. So this morning we heard that Eli Lilly has billions of doses of orforglipron, their small molecule GLP-1, ready to hit the market once the FDA approves orforglipron. But there's always been a huge question mark hanging over orforglipron because no other company can seem to make a small molecule GLP-1 pill that doesn't end up showing liver safety issues. And so the same thing happened with Terns Pharmaceutical. We basically got data, phase 2 data from Turn 601 that showed 4 to 5% placebo-adjusted weight loss. But there were also reports of mild liver enzyme elevations and a 12% discontinuation rate. So after reviewing this data, Turn announced that it will actually seek partners for its metabolic program and redirect its focus towards oncology. So the other assets that it had going, and it had some really interesting candidates. I think a GLP, GIP, maybe in an oral peptide form. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. You can check out onthepen.com and just put Turn Pharmaceuticals in the search bar, and you'll find it'll be the first one that pops up, and you can get up to speed on everything they have. But there's sounds like they want to partner with somebody to drive that program, and they're going to focus back on oncology. So for patients, this is like another, to me, this is another red flag, because I've had this concern with orforglipron, which Dave Ricks is out there saying orforglipron is going to be the GLP-1 for all. Listen, my concern with this is not necessarily that we've seen liver safety issues in the clinical trials for orforglipron. Very, very minimal, I would say. They're there if you look closely, but not in great numbers. But if you look at some of the clues that we've seen along the way, in phase 3, they really dialed back the highest dose, I think from 46 milligrams to maybe 30 some milligrams. So they really dialed back the highest dose. And of course, what they're doing is trading off efficacy there, right? Higher dose. These are all dose dependent drugs typically. And so you're trading off a certain amount of weight loss to reduce side effects, potentially could concerns about liver issues and liver toxicity been one of them. And my concern for this is all over. We've got 160, 100 to 180,000 viewers across all platforms here at On the Pen, and millions of people that see our content monthly and interact with us. And the one thing that I've learned is that people really tend to play doctor at home with these medications. They tend to take more than prescribed. They tend to take it more frequently than prescribed, because people living with obesity are desperate to not be obese. I mean, it doesn't really get much more complicated than that in this conversation. So my concern with these small molecules is that people will ultimately take more than is prescribed because they did it with a shot, or they did it with an injectable peptide and they didn't have any negative effects. These are not the same. And I really fear that these medications and these potential liver issues with, again, the small molecule non-peptide oral versions of this may end up giving fodder to the folks around the world who seem to want every reason to hate these medications. So this is something that we're going to continue to watch closely here at On the Pen, because I believe that this is a story that will, obviously it's yet to be told. This thing has to hit the market. But my request to you is always take medications the way that your doctor prescribed them. Don't take your health and life into your own hands. Follow the information that the experts are giving you. Make decisions competently and confidently with your medical providing team. But these small molecules, I'm not going to lie, these small molecules, they concern me quite a bit. So let's talk a little bit about how GLP-1 continues to show that it has protective benefits outside of weight loss. Like we've found many stories over the last year that seem to point to this idea that the GLP-1 molecule itself, specifically GLP-1, tends to be specifically cardiac protective, independent of the dose and independent of the amount of weight loss. And so a new Lancet analysis of the SELECT trial confirms that semaglutide not only reduces weight, but protects the heart even in people without diabetes. So among more than 17,000 adults with obesity and heart disease, semaglutide significantly lowered the risk of heart attacks and stroke compared to placebo. And researchers found that the benefit was independent of total weight loss. So we already kind of knew that from the SELECT trial, which is a huge trial. I want to say it was around a 4-year trial where patients were not forced to dose escalate. They kind of were able to maintain their progress at whatever dose they were on because they wanted to keep these people in the trial as long as possible. So if they cranked the dose up to the highest dose and people had all these side effects and dropped out of the actual study, this wouldn't have been good for the overall data. So they were allowed to stay on lower doses, which meant not everybody sort of, let's say, extracted the highest amount of weight loss that they could have out of the drug because they didn't dose escalate. Similar to what we saw in the CagriSema trial, which is why the CagriSema numbers didn't really eclipse the Tirzepatide number in weight loss. In that trial, folks did not have to dose escalate. They could continue at the dose that they were tolerating. And so instead of slamming people with the highest doses, Novo Nordisk ended up just allowing patients to stay in that trial on the dose that they were tolerating to keep people in the trial. And to mitigate side effects and really to, I think, reflect how this stuff is prescribed in the real world. Like one of the things that really drives me nuts about these medications is because they're dose dependent, doctors tend to want to slam people with the highest dose as quick as possible. And really, I think for a lot of people, that report their anecdotal experience here in the On the Pen community is low and slow tends to be better, both in terms of managing side effects and, being able to maybe achieve their results at lower doses so that they can maintain their progress at lower doses or even potentially come off the medicine altogether when they hit their goal. So this trial, the CagriSema trial, sorry, I'm going off on a little bit of a rabbit trail, was designed to keep patients on the medicine long term so that they got really good data. And in this data, the SELECT trial showed us that patients did not have to lose a tremendous amount of weight to see cardiac benefits. We learned that despite the dose that they were on, there seemed to be there was a reduction in all-cause mortality, including major cardiovascular events. In this post analysis of the SELECT trial published in Lancet, it actually showed that the benefit, the cardiac benefit, was independent of total weight loss, but there was about 1/3 of the reductions could be explained by the reduction in waist circumference for overall heart protection. So maybe some correlation there between the waist circumference and the shrinking of the waist circumference and the total benefit. But again, we have more proof that GLP-1s don't just change how we look or how much we weigh. They actually change how long and how well we live. And so there's a really fiery discussion that took place on one of the videos that I posted this week where somebody came in the comments and they were just there to antagonize people on GLP-1s and say people on GLP-1s, they experience, gallbladder issues. They experience higher rates of slowed gut motility, all this stuff. And it's like, you know what? Folks living with diabetes and obesity have an increased risk of cancer, an increased risk of heart attack, and increased risks of stroke. We could go on down the line. We know what the dangers are of living with untreated obesity and type 2 diabetes are. And so this is more fodder, I think, for a future where more and more people without obesity will be taking microdoses of these medications because these benefits seem to be independent of weight loss, right? And we covered a rodent study recently that showed cardiac benefit after a chemically induced heart attack in rodents, that the group that was given the GLP-1, in this case exenatide, had better outcomes with restoring blood flow to the heart than when they blocked the GLP-1 pathway on the cells of the heart in those rodents. And so we're just seeing more and more evidence that these are longevity drugs. It was a topic of conversation that was huge at Health last week when we were in Vegas, having conversations with folks about specifically microdosing GLP-1s, which I'm all for. I think that there's so much data out there that shows that these things have benefit. Talk to your doctor. But I think that the data is becoming more and more compelling. Now, if you're tracking your progress, do it the right way. If you've lived with obesity, do it the right way with Shape'a. So my color this week with Shape'a is teal. You can see that it's going to be light weight loss, right? I just weighed myself this morning. That's a screenshot from jumping on my Shape'a scale. It's the numberless scale. And that might sound counterintuitive, but if you've ever lived with the sort of the scale having the power to derail your progress in your journey with obesity, the Shape'a really taps into something that is unique, because every week, every day, I want to step on this thing and I want to maintain the color zone. So it's zooming out. It's looking at 10 days of trends in your weight and body composition to keep you in a goal range that is color coded, rather than maybe stepping on the scale, being 5 pounds up one day and saying, I'm not stepping on this stupid thing again. Next thing you know, it's been a month, 2 months since you've stepped on the scale. And if you're anything like me, when you're engaged with stepping on the scale, you're engaged more throughout the day in your health. So Shape'a, really the gift that it gives me, it helps me to stay engaged with my health, because real progress isn't just about pounds. It's about patterns that we stack over and over and over to get to where we want to be. I'm at my lowest weight in 10 years, sitting at 265. And it keeps going down, and I'm still in that losing zone there. So check out home.myshape'a.com/OTP. Take you to the On the Pen landing page, and you'll learn that you can save 30% off the cost of a Shape'a scale. Well worth it. Love our partners at Shape'a. So story number 6 brings us to Aequita Pharmacy. So you may be like, why are we talking about Aequita? Why are we talking about Mochi again? Well, back in March, our friend Lee from Lee Fits In, you can find him on YouTube. You can find him on TikTok. Lee Fits In has been all over this story and covered it like unlike anyone else. And he submitted a request back in March for some whistleblower allegations that were filed with the state, and he just received them this past week. So these documents from case 2024-17788CF, these are all available on our website at obesity.news. You can get to basically all of the things that we have by going to otplinks.com. Is going to be the best hub to kind of stay in touch with everything that we do, including our articles that we post and our podcast videos. But you can catch that case filing there. So according to the official documents, a whistleblower alleged that unlicensed individuals handled and shipped GLP-1 medications, allegedly mislabeled raw materials from overseas suppliers. In other words, taking gray market peptides, inspected and even tested sterilization methods directly on patient drugs without oversight. Again, these are all whistleblower allegations. None of this has been proven fact, but this is something that a whistleblower threw out against Aequita Pharmacy. Now, as we know, Aequita Pharmacy was a big partner with Mochi Health in terms of filling their prescriptions. The complaint also alleged that non-employees were recruited from public parking lots to assist with packaging and shipping, which could have potentially exposed patient data to unauthorized people. So all of these very scary things. The state marked the case for quick closure because the same allegations were already under investigation in other related cases. So these claims remain, unproven, but they raise critical questions about oversight, about ethics, about patient safety in the compounding space. That's why it's so important to work with companies that you trust, right? Which is 100% why we're working with Shed, their partner at Strive Pharmacy. Again, a pharmacy that we trust implicitly. I've gotten to know those people there. I've gotten to know the ways that they go above and beyond, and we'll be detailing that for you all somewhere in the future. But As my friend and Lee, advocate Lee, who obtained these records said, this isn't about prosecuting anyone. It's about patients demanding transparency. So when people inject medications into their body, they deserve to know who made it. They deserve to know what's in it and who's accountable. And so that's why we're bringing this story. It's not to pile on Mochi. It's just that it took a long time to get the information that Lee was after. And we thought we would bring it to you because I think it's just helpful to be aware in general of how important it is to choose who you're sourcing, to choose who you are working with. All very, very important things to do if you're not going with the branded medications. Now, let's talk a little bit about something a little bit more uplifting, because this was a headline that we brought you earlier this week from our friends over at Roe. Roe announced the creation of the RAIDED FN scale, RAID food noise scale, the first scientifically validated tool to measure food noise in the brain. This is a huge deal, and I've heard different people say for different reasons that they didn't understand why this was a big deal, and I want to help put this in context. So doctors have never had a way to quantify food noise and what that means other than patient anecdotes, right? So the RAID food noise scale is short for the Roe Allison Indiana Durinder Food Noise Inventory, and it takes under 2 minutes to complete. And it measures 3 key dimensions: preoccupation, persistence, and dysphoria. Now, this is a fascinating tool, because what you can imagine is that if we have a tool that is clinically tested, clinically proven, developed by experts in the field, then you could see ultimately clinical trials adopt the food noise scale so that someday you may be able to compare what medicines, as we get deluged with these over the next 5 to 10 years, these new medications, which ones really work for food noise. Because I think that's really important to people. When folks look at the idea of potentially coming off of a GLP-1 medication, or even looking at some of the things like Fractal Health is developing, like the Revita and the Rejuva program, where trains your body to make more GLP-1 and GIP, or trains your resets your duodenum to sense nutrients better so that you can release more of your endogenous hormones. Like that's great, but if I'm off the Zepbound, what does that mean for my food noise? Now there will be a way to measure that. So if they sort of incorporate this kind of tool within clinical trials, it's the first comprehensive tool of its kind to measure food noise, so it could be used in clinical trials potentially. Then you'd be able to go and measure against the new drugs that come on the market. We talked earlier about Mazdutide and semaglutide together in a clinical trial. What's the food noise score for Mazdutide? What's the food noise score for semaglutide, for Retatrutide, Tirzepatide, and on down the line? So I think this is really something that matters, because it validates what's only been something that's been anecdotally shared by patients before. So it clinically validates that, giving a pathway to measure this clinically for patients. So it could change the way that we choose dose escalation of drugs. It could change the way that we do maintenance. It could change what we use for maintenance. It could change so many things. And as you all know, the food noise scale could be adopted for other things, because we know that people report less drinking behaviors, less gambling behaviors, less sex addiction behaviors, all of these things that seem to work in concert with these medications. And so I think this is huge news. I disagree with people who don't think that this is a big deal, because I think this has the power to really change the game for the future of obesity medicine, how we develop drugs, and how we choose the medications that might best fit what we need to treat the disease of obesity. So at On the Pen here, our goal is to help you have more competent and confident conversations with your doctor, to hold the system accountable along the way. I hope that we've done that today. If we have, would you consider giving us a 5-star rating and review on the podcast? You just have to hit the 5-star thing. It really helps the work that we do. If you're watching over here on YouTube, I would just ask that you would hit the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. That is going to really help the work that we do here. Hit the subscribe, drop a comment. All of those things are little forms of advocacy that help us grow and reach more people. I really appreciate all of you being here today. You're the best part of what we do. Wouldn't, and shouldn't do it without you, because together we're not just changing medicine, we're actually writing some of the headlines that exist out there in this world, and we are patient focused, and we're doing it together. So thank you for being here. We'll check you on the next